In the heart of a restless Athens, a city still nursing the wounds of war and political upheaval. The year 399 BC marked a fateful convergence of philosophy and fear. The Peloponnesian War had concluded only a few years prior, leaving Athens defeated and its democratic spirit deeply shaken. The brief but brutal reign of the 30 tyrants, an oligarchic regime installed by Sparta, had left a scar of suspicion on the public consciousness. Though democracy had been restored and a general amnesty declared, the political climate remained volatile and charged with resentment. It was within this cauldron of anxiety that a 70-year-old philosopher named Socrates found himself the target of the state's ire. For decades, he had been a familiar, if eccentric, figure in the agora, engaging citizens from all walks of life in probing conversations. He wrote no books, established no formal school, and claimed no specific teachings, yet his influence was undeniable. His method, the Socratic elenchus, involved a relentless series of questions designed to expose contradictions in his interlocutor's beliefs. This process often left prominent and powerful Athenians appearing foolish, their claims to knowledge dismantled in public. While it attracted a following of devoted young men, it also cultivated a growing number of powerful enemies. The formal accusation against him was brought forth by 3 men: Meletus, a young and largely unknown poet; Anytus, a powerful politician and wealthy tanner; and Lycon, a rhetorician. Anytus, in particular, was a respected democratic figure who likely saw Socrates' questioning of tradition as a threat to the stability of the restored state. The charges were twofold and severe. First, Socrates was accused of asebeia, or impiety. This meant he failed to acknowledge the gods of the city and had introduced new, foreign divinities. This charge likely stemmed from his frequent references to his daimonion, a divine inner voice that he claimed warned him against making mistakes. To his accusers, this personal divine sign was a dangerous and heretical alternative to the city's shared pantheon. The second charge was that he corrupted the youth of Athens. He was blamed for encouraging young men to question their elders, disrespect authority, and abandon traditional Athenian values. The fact that some of his former associates, like Critias and Alcibiades, had become notorious traitors to the democracy only strengthened this accusation in the public mind. The penalty demanded by the prosecution was death. Trial took place in the heart of Athens, likely in the Stoa Basileos or a similar public building near the Agora. A massive jury, or dikasterion, of 501 male citizens, chosen by lot, was convened to hear the case. These were not legal experts but ordinary Athenians, representing a cross-section of the populace. Socrates, facing his peers and accusers, was given a chance to deliver his defense, his apologia. Plato's account, the Apology, provides the most enduring record of this speech. Socrates began not with flattery or pleas for pity, as was common in Athenian courts, but with a frank and somewhat ironic tone. He addressed the long-standing prejudices against him, suggesting he was battling shadows and slander that had been building for years. He explained that his life's mission began with a prophecy from the oracle at Delphi. The oracle had declared that no man was wiser than Socrates. Puzzled by this, Socrates set out to test the pronouncement by questioning those with a reputation for wisdom. He interrogated politicians, poets, and craftsmen, only to find that they all believed they knew a great deal, but in fact knew very little. He concluded that his own wisdom lay in the humble recognition that he knew nothing. This philosophical quest, he argued, was a divine duty, a service to the god Apollo. He then directly cross-examined his main accuser, Meletus, with devastating logic. He cornered Meletus into contradicting himself, showing the charges to be flimsy and born of personal animosity. Socrates asked if he was the only person in Athens who corrupted the youth, while all others improved them. He demonstrated the absurdity of accusing him of being both an atheist and an introducer of new gods. Despite dismantling the formal charges, Socrates' defense was anything but conciliatory. He famously described himself as a gadfly sent by the gods to sting the lazy horse of the Athenian state. He argued that his constant questioning, though annoying, was essential for the health and virtue of the city. He proclaimed that he would rather obey the god than the jury, and would never stop practicing philosophy. He warned the jurors that if they killed him, they would harm themselves more than they would harm him. He stated that the unexamined life is not worth living. His speech was a defense not of his life, but of his life's work. He refused to bring his weeping wife and children to court to beg for sympathy, calling it a shameful display. This defiance of courtroom convention likely alienated many of the jurors who expected a performance of submission. When the time came to vote, the verdict was guilty. The margin was narrower than perhaps expected. 280 votes for conviction against 221 for acquittal. The trial then moved to its second phase, the sentencing. The prosecution formally proposed the penalty they had sought all along: death. Death by hemlock. Socrates was then given the opportunity to propose a counter penalty. A defendant was expected to suggest a serious alternative, like exile or a substantial fine. This would have given the jury a reasonable choice and likely saved his life. Instead, Socrates doubled down on his defiance with breathtaking audacity. He argued that he had done the city a great service as its philosophical gadfly. Therefore, he claimed, he did not deserve a punishment, but a reward. Proposed that he be given free meals for life at the Prytaneum, the sacred public hall. This was an honor reserved for Olympic victors and the city's greatest benefactors. The suggestion was an ultimate expression of his ironic worldview and a profound insult to the court's authority. Only after this shocking proposal did he reluctantly suggest a fine. He first offered to pay 1 mina, a paltry sum, as it was all he could afford. His wealthy friends, including Plato and Crito, frantically conferred with him. They then increased the offer to 30 minae, a very substantial sum, and guaranteed its payment themselves. But the damage was already done. The jury, outraged by his arrogance and feeling utterly mocked, was in no mood for compromise. They were forced to choose between the insultingly low and then high fine and the death penalty. The second vote was swift and decisive. This time, a much larger majority voted for death. Socrates had, in essence, condemned himself through his fatal defense. He accepted the verdict with the same equanimity he had displayed throughout the trial. He addressed the court one last time, not with anger, but with reflection. He told the jurors who voted for his acquittal that death might be a great blessing. It could be either a dreamless sleep, a peaceful nothingness, or a journey to another place. If it was a journey, he mused, he would get to converse with the great heroes and thinkers of the past. To the jurors who condemned him, he offered a prophecy, warned that they would be pursued by avengers, his followers, who would question and criticize them even more harshly than he had. He concluded, "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our ways, I to die, and you to live. Which is better, God only knows." Socrates was then led away to prison to await his execution. His execution was delayed for about a month due to a religious festival. This period allowed his friends and followers to visit him daily. Plato's dialogues, Crito and Phaedo, describe these final days. In Crito, his old and wealthy friend of the same name, visits him with a detailed plan for escape. Crito argued that Socrates had a duty to his children, and that his friends would be shamed if he did not flee. Socrates calmly refused, personifying the laws of Athens in a powerful argument. He argued that he had lived his entire life under the city's laws, implicitly agreeing to abide by them. To flee now would be to betray that agreement and to act unjustly. He concluded that it is never right to do wrong, even in response to a wrong done to you. Crito was silenced, convinced by the philosopher's unwavering commitment to principle. The final days recounted in Phaedo. His friends gathered in his cell for one last conversation. His wife Xanthippe was there, but was led away in distress so as not to disturb the philosophical atmosphere. Socrates spent his final hours calmly discussing the immortality of the soul. He argued that true philosophers practice for dying their entire lives, as death is the separation of the soul from the body. He offered several arguments for the soul's eternal nature, comforting his grieving friends. As sunset approached, the jailer arrived, weeping as he told Socrates it was time. The jailer praised Socrates as the noblest and gentlest man who had ever entered the prison. Socrates asked for the cup of hemlock to be brought. He said a prayer and drank the poison calmly and without hesitation, as if it were a normal drink. His friends, who had managed to remain composed, finally broke down in tears. Socrates gently chided them, asking them to be quiet and brave. He was instructed to walk around until his legs grew heavy. He then lay down on the cot, and the poison's cold numbness began to spread from his feet upwards. The executioner pointed out the progress of the poison to the onlookers. Just before the end, Socrates uncovered his face for his final words. He said, "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt." These enigmatic last words have been debated for centuries. Then, after a brief convulsion, the philosopher lay still. Crito reached out and closed his friend's mouth and eyes. This was the end of their friend, a man whom Plato would call the wisest, most just, and best of all men he had ever known. The trial and death of Socrates became a foundational story for Western philosophy. He was transformed into a martyr for free thought and principled integrity. His story serves as a timeless and troubling reminder of the conflict between the individual conscience and the power of the state. The Athenians who condemned him may have silenced the man, but they immortalized his legacy. His accusers, Melitus and Anytus, are remembered by history only as the persecutors of a great mind. The questions Socrates asked in the Agora continue to echo through the centuries. What is justice? What is virtue? How should one live? The trial was not just a legal proceeding, but a philosophical drama. It pitted the messy, emotional reality of democratic politics against the uncompromising pursuit of truth. Socrates' defense was a masterclass in irony, a tool he wielded with surgical precision. He feigned ignorance while demonstrating a deeper understanding than his opponents. The jury, composed of practical men, likely missed the irony and heard only arrogance. They were farmers, merchants and soldiers, not professional philosophers. They judged Socrates not on the logic of his arguments, but on his perceived character and his respect for the court. Socrates' refusal to play by the established rules of the legal game sealed his fate. Could have easily won his freedom with a more conventional, submissive defense. But for Socrates, a life without philosophy was no life at all. He chose death over intellectual and moral compromise. His death sent shockwaves through Athens, though the immediate public reaction is not well documented. Plato, his most famous student, was profoundly affected and likely left Athens for a time. The trial became the central, motivating event for Plato's own philosophical work. Would spend his life trying to design a state where a man like Socrates would not be executed, but honored. The legacy of the trial is therefore complex. A tragedy for Athens, but a triumph for philosophy. It demonstrated the potential for democracy to devolve into mob rule, swayed by rhetoric and prejudice. It highlighted the eternal tension between disruptive innovation and conservative tradition. Socrates' daimonion, his inner voice, remained silent throughout the trial and sentencing. He interpreted this silence to mean that his actions, leading to his death, were not wrong. He went to his death not as a victim, but as a philosopher completing his final and most important argument. The image of the wise man calmly drinking the poison has captivated artists and thinkers for millennia. It is the ultimate embodiment of living and dying by one's principles. The trial of Socrates remains a powerful lesson on the price of wisdom and the courage required to speak truth to power.